Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Gamer Chats. You've got Lotus and Skull here, and today we're gonna have an art-related discussion, aren't we, Skull?
Hmm.
Yes, we're going to be talking about what was it again, traditional art versus digital art.
Yep. Newman, get off my mouse. It's not
don't,
the kind of mouse you eat.
don't mind, there's animals, but yes. So, where do we want to start with this, Skull?
Um, I don't know. Let's maybe explain the. Oh,
Explain.
I mean, my entire reason for wanting to talk about this is because I've heard a lot of people arguing about whether or not digital art is a real form of art because it takes a lot less effort and skill than traditional art does. Because if you make a mistake with digital art or whatever, right, you can just undo it. Traditional art, you can't all the time just undo it.
So I can say, as someone who is very much still like a novice when it comes to digital art, that is absolute bullshit. Digital art definitely takes skill. Oh, hands down, does it take skill? And practice. A fuck ton of practice. And allow me to explain myself. So, I started out as more of a traditional artist, but granted, I grew up kind of in that I want to say in between phase where it wasn't as big as it is now, but it was slowly creeping up. But it was still hard to get your hands on good materials and things like that. So, you usually didn't see people doing a whole bunch of digital art, but then it slowly became more, you know, the common thing to do as the supplies became a lot more accessible and people who are younger were able to get their hands on it. It creates an interesting what is that called? I can't think right now. But anyway, the I'd say the only thing that might take away potentially is the fact that or at least what I've heard when it comes to this discussion is that digital art doesn't feel as real as traditional art. Like they're not debating if it's real art or not, but just how there are words for these, and I can't think except for the simple ones. How to explain this? Where it's like fuck, help me out here, Skull.
Um, Give me some basic. I might have the word.
Well, it's like you don't feel, I guess, the rawness, the emotion, the just everything that the artist would pour into it isn't as noticeable, I guess. Like, you know what I'm saying?
It doesn't feel as.
Authentic, genuine,
Yeah,
all those things.
yeah.
Which I can get that. And I also back during the summer I had my aunt visiting us, and she definitely made her stance very vocal about what she thinks versus um the traditional art versus the digital art, saying that the digital art looks good because of all the colors and fine lines and things like that, but it's not quite the same because with the traditional art she can see all the little smaller imperfections and make out better details with the traditional art, like textures and things like that, which I think mostly comes down to me not being that good with digital art compared to traditional art, but that could just be that. I don't know, it
Like,
guess
yeah,
it also just depends.
it digital art is definitely like subjective.
How so?
So, like what one person sees in like a piece of art and what they think is art is going to be completely different from what another person thinks or like how they interpret a piece of art.
Well,
So
that's just art in
I think like
general.
yeah, like just in general, I think like that's a part of it is like at least for the argument in general is just like people having differing opinions on what is or isn't art or like different opinions on how art gets interpreted or how it should be interpreted.
Right. Again, like that's not just restricted to either like the medium English. I don't know what it is. um but yeah, that's just like art in general because again, it's just not restricted to the two different types. And even then there's more underneath that umbrella. But what do you think just in general when it comes to digital art then, Skull?
Um, I think it really depends
How so?
because um like when it comes to art and stuff, I think it kind of it's hard to explain, but like um I mean, I know we're gonna get more into it in like the next episode that we have planned, but like a lot of people are leaning more into that AI generation is digital art,
The
or at least it seems like it. But just in general, like when it comes to art, I think art is whatever people put into it. Like when it comes down to it, like anything can be considered art. So I think it really just how much how much did you put into it? What was the intention of like whatever? Um some people, it's their career, others they just draw for fun. Sometimes it's both, but I don't know, like art's a really weird thing for me to explain, like
well, more. What's
especially since
your feelings on digital art? Because I know you, like
well,
I, well, you dabble
I
more in
mean,
both than I do.
I do both. Um, when it comes down to it, I don't mind doing digital art. Like, I don't mind digital art as a thing, but I much prefer to do traditional art because I personally enjoy like the feel of the paper underneath me. I like being able to feel what I'm making as opposed to like looking at it on a screen as I'm making it. It's a completely different feeling, like just in general for doing one or the other.
Now, see that I can agree with, but as I've gotten older, I've gotten lazier. So the digital art is a lot more appealing to me when it comes to character designs and coloring. Because even though it's not as appealing or pop as much as more experienced and skilled digital artists, I do enjoy just the flat colors, so it gives me an idea of what characters will look like, what colors I need to use as like a reference sheet. And I don't do a lot of character art in general, just the designs. So I don't really bother with much else. So for someone like
I
me, the
mean,
digital art works.
I mean, at the same time, you could argue that you could do the exact same thing traditionally, when I do my character designs and stuff, if I'm doing a new design, I'll bring out my alcohol markers and I can get flat colors doing the exact same thing as I would just normally.
Well, here's the thing. As someone who, obviously grew up on traditional art, that it was the main thing, it's kind of hard for me not to just go with what I was taught, what I was basically what I learned, which was to just like learn to shade as you go and things like that. It's a little bit different digitally because it's something you do kind of like after the fact almost. Whereas I know for myself, I learned to do it as I was going. It's weird. I think ultimately it just also comes down to like how your process is.
Yeah. I mean, with my digital art, the way I do it, it's almost like painting a picture as opposed to drawing the way I color. I mean, you've seen it with the commission you got. The way that I went through doing it, you got your flat color or whatever, but like as I build up and add to it, it's almost like I'm adding paint to a canvas as opposed to, ink to a paper or whatever, where it feels different.
That would feel different because like you compare that with what I do, which is like the most basic shit. um, yours definitely feels more. I guess more real would be a good way to put it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I mean, like you've seen my stuff. You've seen how
Yeah.
extremely basic it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether that's good or bad, I leave that to other people. But
Yeah.
but it's nice. I will say it definitely does take quite a bit of skill though to be able to work with digital art as well as
Oh
not
yeah.
and like not to forget the different types of programs there are because there are many different drawing programs, some that you do have to buy and some that are available for free.
Haha, piracy.
Uh-huh. But regardless of like whichever one you use, it still takes time to learn how to use the program and everything else because again like some features won't be available unless otherwise like you buy it from you buy and use this program if you want these certain features, or you're gonna have to
Yeah.
find like a workaround.
And
Cause
then
go ahead.
and then you've got the artists who are absolutely insane and use Microsoft Paint and create these amazing fucking art pieces.
Which more power to him. I could never. But then again, like
It's one layer. How do they do it? It's one layer.
it doesn't matter. They just go at it. They just know what they're doing. It's probably something they use for a while. To be fair. But yeah, no, like
Yeah.
I feel like with digital art you can do a lot more than you could with traditional art.
Oh, definitely.
Cause like you can obviously still mimic the same effects and whatnot with traditional art. Like I've seen traditional artists do these kind of things,
Mhm.
but it is easier with the digital art,
Mhm.
which is nice.
But I mean, when it comes down to it, every medium has its limitations. Like,
That is
no
true.
matter what art you do, if it's digital, traditional, if you paint, like whatever, there are always limitations to the medium you're working with. And I mean, sure, you can mix mediums or whatever, but like, at the end of the day, there's still limitations to what can be done, and it also comes down to like you're limited by your skill essentially. You can push yourself out of your comfort zone and like try hard to do other things, but at the same time, there's always going to be some level of limitation.
And I would also add on top of that, when it comes to that kind of stuff, it also does come down to style as well.
Yeah.
Basically, like, I guess a good way to say it, I'm just gonna use my style as kind of like a reference point. So when I look around, obviously I'm an artist writer, so I love to procrastinate and spend most of my time on Pinterest when I shouldn't be on Pinterest anyway. So pro tips: if you don't want to do shit, just fuck around on Pinterest. But anyway, when I look at some of these other artists and what they're able to do, I see a lot of them. I wouldn't say necessarily go for realism, but you don't see so much of like lines or heavy lines like the black lines. If they usually do have lines, they're very thin and usually blend with the color that they're using for that piece, whether it be like the skin, the clothes, or the case may be, or if it even has lines at all. Otherwise, they just go in for like the straight shading to give it depth and distinguish it from everything else, which makes it
Yeah.
feel obviously like more real and makes it pop. Versus someone like me who I probably could learn to do that stuff if I pushed myself a little bit more, if I took more time with the programs I work with. But it's
But
not,
why make yourself suffer?
well, that, like, okay, one, I have a lot more things to do than do that kind of stuff. Like, more props to those who can and can do it very efficiently. I don't know how you do it. I've tried before and I just can't do it. But more also because my style is more cartoon, that comic book look to it. Like you've seen
Mm-hmm.
it. You'd agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Like the bold, thick lines, that they get thicker depending on like if the area would be shaded or not, and things like that. And even the shading
Mm-hmm.
resembles more of that comic book, older comic books, I would say. More modern ones obviously have more of that realistic approach to it,
Yeah.
but like the older ones that had like the hard shading to it, or even what you see in some anime as well. Some, but
Yeah.
not all. But no, yeah, like it ultimately also does come down to style and your preference when it comes to the art that you create. Because again, like I would love to be able to make incredibly awesome shit, like a lot of these artists do. But at the same time, I could find the time to do it. I may need the
Yeah.
patience. Patience is kind of lacking, especially since it goes in other places and other people. And I think ultimately what it comes down for me is I love drawing and things like that, but it's honestly like not something I'm gonna hard focus on when I'm more of a writer than an artist, which still makes me an artist, but a different kind of artist. Anyway, it's easier for me to use the digital art compared to the traditional art because it definitely takes longer with traditional art, in my opinion. And it's not to say like digital art is a lot faster, but it just kind of feels like it. I guess that's a good way to say this. So one of my best pieces to me, I made when I was in I think it was no, I was out of high school. I was in college. I was getting my bachelor's. It was a character art. Oh, which one was it? It was for an OC that was. This was right around the time when Steven Universe was at its like height. Its hype, you know.
Okay.
So it's I was in that fandom. I was creating OCs, gemstonas, basically building this entire like AU with a friend at the time, with our own gems as they were integrated into the gem society kind of thing. And the one that I made to kind of expand that universe that we added on was a pearl, a persona. This one was a rebel, and her design took me 3 hours to put together. Was incredibly detailed, which was my first mistake.
I think you shared this somewhere
Yes,
before.
I've shared it with you guys. I know I have. But going through and outlining it, because obviously when you do everything traditionally, you got to have all the correct materials and things like that. Um, I had to get the correct pens out, and I had to make sure everything was good. Get rid of all the eraser lines after the pen ink dried, or marker ink. I don't remember what I was using at the time. And I used pencils, colored pencils, not markers, because it was what I was more comfortable with.
Comfortable.
Yeah, because I tried markers, but I could never really get into it. I think it was like this
I
kind of
kind of,
thing when I was younger, like whenever you'd get the lines whenever you color with markers.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really say anything. Had I kept working with Crayola markers, before I bought my alcohol markers, I was getting to a point where I could easily create pieces with Crayola markers that looked like they were done with alcohol markers. The
Okay.
colors were smooth. It's just a matter of like practice, really,
Yeah, that's the thing. It just takes a
like
lot of
coloring technique.
practice. And like that's how I felt with the colors, like the colored pencils. Because there
Yeah.
were points where I'd have people ask me what I use, and when I tell them colored pencils, they'd look at it again. They're like, "No, you didn't." I'm like, "Yeah, that's colored pencils."
Oh yeah. There are some insane artists out there who can use crayon
I
like
know.
really fucking well, and I'm like,
Oh,
whoa.
see, it takes skill and practice.
I had a friend in school who used to be really good at doing art with crayons. I don't know what they do with art anymore, but to be fair, I don't really talk to them anymore either.
That is fair. But yeah, so like, but yeah, so again, like I used colored pencils at the time, and just between the outlining and the coloring, it took me roughly 8 or 9 hours to finish the piece.
Yeah.
And that's including the shading with the coloring. And that's not
Oh yeah.
including the extra 3 hours it took to design the character.
Yeah.
Because
No.
armor was still like one of those things that was difficult for me to design or something I took a lot of time to design.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It was quite the project. But when it
Yeah.
comes to things now, it's just not even half that time. I'm pretty sure, like, minus the coloring and other unique details, because that's something I could probably do, but probably wouldn't if I were to draw it again. Well, I might actually. It would probably take me probably a third of that time, maybe about half, cutting out the design process part.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to because again, there's a lot of detail on that character. And just heads up, if you ever design characters, be careful how much detail you add because you need to also add in if I if you ever draw the character again, will you want to? Because that's the biggest thing. Um, a little bit of
Yeah.
advice for character designers out there or starting and whatnot. Just watch how much detail you're adding into your designs. Because keep in mind, you may have to draw them again. And if you add
Yeah.
too
And
much detail,
yeah. The same thing can go and be said with colors. Um.
well, it depends on where you put those colors and how
Yeah.
much you use them. Because, like, if you just make a saturated mess, then yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. No. Like, I was reading somewhere in an art tips thing where like if you're doing basic character designs or whatever, try to keep the color palette to about 6 or 7 colors, not including the colors you use for shading. It just makes it a lot easier for you if you have to redraw the character
Exactly.
more than once.
Unless you manage to, like, keep the extra colors to very minimal spaces. Because
Yeah,
I can guarantee you, like, you've seen my Volpina dress design with all the colors on it.
yeah,
I would have no issue drawing that again just because of, like, even though there's a lot of colors on it, it's very simple at the same time.
yeah. It's how you placed them.
Exactly. It takes a lot of skill and practice to do just about anything when it comes to this. And going back to our discussion against traditional and digital art, I still do like traditional art. I mean, like you, Skull. I you know me. I draw it out first on Sketchpad because
Yeah.
it's what I'm more familiar with. It's what I've been doing for the better part of a decade now.
Yeah.
So, and been trying to kind of move from that just because one, it would save in cost of supplies, having to buy new sketchbooks, pencils, eraser tips, and things like that.
Well, I mean, what I would suggest then, like, you don't need super expensive, like, you don't even need to buy a sketch pad per se. My favorite way if I'm doing like character designs or like sketches is I'll just use printer paper. And it's $10 for a pack of like 500 paper sheets of paper.
Well, see, the
I don't
problem
know, it's
is,
probably way cheaper in the US, but like
see, my only
it
issue with
lasts.
that is I have a lot of papers thrown around everywhere because that's how I keep my notes is notebooks here, papers here, everything mixed in between. So, the only reason why I wouldn't do that myself is just because of the disorganized mess I have and
Let's
how,
not get
you know.
let's not get into talking about how bad my kitchen table is right now.
Yeah, I have no intention to, but like what you define as a mess and what I define as a mess are two very different things, though. Like even just having a pile of papers is considered a mess to me. So no, yeah, and one of those relatively neat people until I'm just like, yeah, fuck it.
We
But
don't just want to talk about the table.
it still comes down like not just the prices of sketchbooks, but also with like pencils and erasers and things like that. Especially considering like I used to use mechanical pencils when I was in high school for drawing,
Hmm.
just because I believe it was easier, so I wouldn't have to like sharpen the pencil every single time when I needed it, or get up to the crappy little what's it, the little pencil sharpeners that they had, because not everyone had the
Rank
electric
ones?
ones. Yes.
God, I hate
The
those. A
ones
lot of
on
the
the
classes in
wall
the
that
high
you had to like adjust it so it was for the right pencil and so
right
on.
size of pencil and you had to like
Yes.
aggressively crank it. Sometimes it would break off the tip of your pencil, sometimes it would get full and you'd be the one who like would have to take the thing off really carefully, trying not to spill any pencil shavings and then go and shake out the entire little compartment.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. Or like or you get one of those extra crappy ones that completely destroys your brand new pencil and it takes it down to a little nub.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That's we know. We know.
They're like trying so hard to get rid of those in most places, but the high school I went to, there were still a bunch in the school when I graduated.
I don't think the high school I went to had very many of those. I think more had shifted over to the electric pencil sharpeners for those that actually had it. I think most people just encourage the use of mechanical pencils for the most part.
Yeah, no, a lot of people were using mechanical pencils or whatever. When it comes to taking notes, I prefer to use a regular pencil. For drawing, I use mechanical and a mix of a regular pencil just for like different line sizes and stuff. But that's not relevant. I keep a personal, like I always kept a personal pencil sharpener, and I still do if I have any sort of pencils with me. Just more
See,
convenient.
I use an electric one when I'm home because it's just easier with that kind of stuff. I tend to stay away from the handheld ones just because certain times you can get a bad batch of pencils. I know recently I had bought a batch of the basic number 2 graphite pencils, and normally they work just fine with the pencil sharpener, but the one I had before my new one, they were just destroyed by the old pencil sharpener. There was something in that batch of pencils that was just bad. And I've encountered that too when it comes to the handhelds, that certain pencils can just be destroyed by those things. So
Yeah,
it just kind of depends. Like it's also just a luck of the draw too when it comes to that kind of shit. Unless you actually want to go
yeah.
with mechanical pencils, but then again, like it's still paying for new erasers to replace the old ones, paying for the lead replacement. new pencils if you lose the ones you were using, so on and so forth. There are some things, obviously, the graphite pencils are better for, like if you want to do, you know that type of
They're
art
better for shading.
shading, and also when you do like the rubbing, where
Yeah,
yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
blending.
Uh,
Yeah, no, they blend so much better than mechanical pencils.
oh, so much better.
I
But
basically destroyed my blending stump just trying to blend mechanical pencils. So I said fuck it and I bought a set of like just the nice different graphite pencils.
see, for me,
My
I never
go
used any special tool. I literally just used my hand and my fingers to like blend the graphite.
I get messy enough as it is just looking at art supplies, so if I can use like a blending stump or a Q-tip to make my hands just a little bit like to give my hands a little bit of mess, I will.
I think I just got used to it because I was one of those idiot artists that always, whenever drawing with the graphite pencils, was rubbing their hand across it the entire time. So as a result, the side of my right hand would always be covered with lead, or the lead graphite and whatnot, and the entire page would have like a dusting of the pencil.
Depending on if I'm drawing in a sketchbook or on like a sheet of printer paper will determine how much of that like dusting of whatever is. Because for whatever reason, if I'm drawing in any of the sketchbooks that have like the coil binds in the middle, because it always bumps against my hand since I'm left-handed, like I have to be really, really careful when I draw. And I still end up getting smudges and stuff all the time.
I feel that. I've gotten better with it with just doing the character designs. I don't know what it is. It's just I'm able to watch myself a little bit more. Maybe it's because I'm aware of what I'm doing at this point and what I shouldn't be doing. But I would have to say, when it comes to the tools and materials, I definitely do prefer digital art only when I have the right tools to do so, which is the
Yeah,
drawing tablet.
yeah, no, I could never do digital art with a mouse.
I know some people that can, and some people who don't really have much of a choice because an old acquaintance of mine had a certain condition. I don't remember what it was exactly, but it made it hard for him to like actually hold a pen or a pencil or anything like that in his hand.
All the more power to the people who can't do mouse art, or like the insane people who do digital art on their phones or
Oh
tablets
my
with their
gosh.
finger.
I don't know how they do that. I could not. I could obviously alter photos and do that kind of stuff. I could never draw with just my finger on my phone. And for those that use drawing tablets where it doesn't have the display screen, all the more power to you as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's absolutely agony. It's part of the reason why
I
I
know
don't
it
do digital art
is.
very
I
often.
know it is. I used to when I okay, so I first tried getting into digital art when I got into college because it was supposed to be part of the program until I learned it was more of a sciency kind of degree, not an actual arts degree. Noise skull.
Oh, sorry.
Figure I'd let you know that now. Um, but no, yeah, I tried doing digital art with just like a normal tablet without the display on it. I couldn't do it. There's just something about it that I could not for the life of me get over and just draw like I was supposed to.
Ooh.
That's up to the same point when I was supposed to be using Adobe programs as well, so I was basically stuck using Illustrator and Photoshop.
Uh,
Yeah, and I I know that some people really do prefer Photoshop when it comes to digital art and saying it's the go-to wherever the case may be, but
I'm gonna be completely honest. There are cheaper art softwares who can do just like there are cheaper art softwares that are one-time purchase that have way more features, like the same features and more as like Photoshop, Illustrator, or whatever for doing art that people use. And when it comes to like art schools and stuff, they can't because, you know, most of the time, like art schools will force them to use Adobe.
Right. Which is exactly what happened in my case. Because again, like even though my bachelor's wasn't exactly the very most artsy, even though they considered it artsy, even though it wasn't really, because you're working with code. um, we pretty much had to use Illustrator. What was it Dreamscape? Not Dreamscape. There's a certain Adobe software where you make infographics. I can't remember what it's called, but we had to use that for one of my classes, which that gave me the biggest headache and a half trying to use that program. And obviously like Photoshop, because it's Adobe. It's the best of the best, right?
No, it's really not.
No, it was just thing because like I use was it Krita? Is that
Creative.
Krita? Thank you. I always say that wrong. Um, I use that one, and even though it doesn't have the features in Photoshop that I've grown used to from using in the past, there all are alternatives English in the software that I can use still that mimics Photoshop to get what I need.
Yeah.
Like the mask layers, I just figured out how to mimic the mask layers from Photoshop, which is really nice. Like holy fuck, it's made things a lot easier in terms of designs.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just you know, you know,
Yeah.
it. You also have to make sure you have the software that matches your tablet too, because
Yeah.
not all tablets will work with all softwares.
Yeah, no. My drawing tablet that I had where I got my Wacom tablet, I could not use my copy of Paint Tool Sai. I had to switch back to Krita. It wouldn't work at all with my tablet, like it wouldn't respond. I had to, if I wanted to use Sai, basically uninstall and reinstall my tablet drivers every single time I wanted to use Sai.
Ew.
Yeah. So I gave up on that and I switched over to the other tablet and it's worked a lot better. Um, I actually just recently stopped using Sai as my primary art software just for, well, Lotus knows the story.
Yeah, I know the story.
And to be fair though, the only reason why I was still using Sai was because of the brush sets that I had. But I found a custom brush pack for Krita that had almost the exact same brushes.
There you go. Also, I want to add this funny little story. And we were talking about tablets. Skull was the one that recommended me the tablet I use now. And the fun thing is, mine that he recommended had the display screen, whereas his didn't.
Yeah, no, I just recommended a brand and like the one that I was looking into getting.
And surprise, it has a display screen.
Oh, I knew it had a display screen. That's why I was, like, well, there's this or there's this. Like, it
That
really
was the
depends on what
only
you want to
one you
do.
recommended to me, though.
Really? I swear I could have recommended more than
No,
one.
that was the only one.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, it
There might have
works,
been
huh?
multiple brands that I recommended or something. Okay, there was something.
I mean, it works and
But
it's
yeah,
nice.
yeah. You're welcome. Saved you the hours of research and stuff.
Yes, you did. Well, I still did some research because I wasn't sure at the time if it actually had a display screen. And mind you, I my ability to pay attention is just as bad as yours at times. If not a little bit better.
I actually have a completely different tablet than the one you've got. Mine
Hey,
was a gift from a
it's
friend.
definitely worth it if you ask me.
Yeah. Someday when I'm not working at $13 an hour and struggling to pay my rent. buy groceries, I'll buy nicer art supplies.
I think I bought mine with my tax return. Actually, I think that's exactly what it was. I bought it with my tax return. Yay. Same reason, same way I got my precious little laptop. But yeah, yeah, fun stuff there. It both require tools that make things a lot easier. Um,
Yeah.
I will ask this in terms of traditional art, since we both obviously know about supplies and whatnot. What do you feel about some of the more like cheaper brands like Rosart, Crayola, those like
Um,
basic ones versus what's considered to be premium art supplies and things like that?
up until about a couple of years ago, when it came to marker, like pencil, crayons, and markers, I was using Crayola up until I got my first set of Prismacolor pencils, which was a set of Prismacolor Scholar, which means they still had that same waxy texture instead of basically just the pigment and nothing else that the premier Prismacolor pencils have. Um, so that was my experience with colored pencils. For markers, I actually had a set of Prismacolor Premier alcohol markers, which I ended up tossing out before I started using Crayola markers again. And I quite enjoy using alcohol markers. I was using a set of Artist Loft skin tone markers, alcohol for my skin tones and stuff when I was doing Crayola marker work because they didn't have the variety of skin tones and you know
Yeah.
around when I started doing my research and stuff, looking into getting markers again. I was looking into comparisons and stuff to see, do I want like Copic markers? Do I want another set of Prismacolor markers? I actually got myself a set of Ohuhu alcohol markers, which are way cheaper than, the other brands. Like for students or whatever, if you're learning or wanting to learn alcohol markers, I'd say get a set of Ohuhu markers. They're really cheap, but they work well enough that you can learn how to do the blending and like all the stuff that you would with regular alcohol markers. The only difference is that they're not refillable compared to, say, Copic markers. But they've got replaceable nibs, you can flip them if you need to, like all that stuff that you could with the Copic markers, but for a much better value. As for skin tones, I'm using the Crayola um, skin tone markers now with my other sets. So when it comes to Crayola, I'm absolutely all for people using Crayola. Like it's a good brand to start out. I never got to use Rose Art all that much, so I have no opinion on that. I absolutely fucking hate Crazy Art brand pencil crayons and crayons. They are like the bottom of the barrel, absolute cheapest art supplies you can get, and they're absolute garbage. You could go to the dollar store and get like the cheap no brand pencil crayons or whatever, and they'd be better than crazy art pencils.
So I'm going to counter you on that one aspect. So obviously I have used um the color pencils pretty much the entire time I did traditional art. So I never really used the Prismacolors much because cost, for starters.
Yeah.
They were always a lot more expensive than what I could actually afford, which is why I gravitated more towards the Rose Art, Crazy Art, and Crayola pencils, even. One thing I did enjoy between the brands is that every color, despite having the same name, was different. Crayola obviously had the more saturated, brighter colors, whereas Rose Art was a little desaturated in those terms, and Crazy Art had a bit of a mix. I would still obviously call them cheap because they're not the best quality because they're basic brand pencils and things like that. But in terms of if you want variety when it comes to the colors you're using, I would recommend using Crazy Art along with Rose Art and Crayola. I know Rose Art was a little bit harder for me to find later on, like more in high school, if anything, because I like the bigger packs where you could get a lot of the other colors, which is what I needed from Rose Art, because I use a lot of Rose Art pencils versus the Crayola, which again had the more brighter colors. Saturated is a better way to say it. So I know for Rosar I had issue finding the pencils I needed, so I ended up getting like lots of duplicates of things I didn't need at all, but it was the only way to get what I needed and things like that. And you get it a lot too with the blacks as well, because Crayola black is like black, like the most like the zeros of the color code. um, Rose Art was a little bit lighter, whereas I believe Crazy Art had the lightest of them, which was nice. It made for a nice combination when it comes to blending and things like that, or if you're trying to layer up your colors, essentially. So, yes, that is my take on it. So, yes, I do agree that they are cheap. However, they are nice if it's all you've got with the other brands, and you can mix and match and layer up nicely.
When it comes to other art supplies, I don't personally use watercolor paint. But one thing I learned recently about watercolor paints is it doesn't matter how cheap your watercolor paints are. They could be like the bottom of the barrel, dirt cheap, like worst watercolor, like quote unquote worst watercolors you could possibly get your hands on. It doesn't matter how bad the quality of your watercolors is. The quality and like getting good paintings actually is entirely based on how good your watercolor paper is.
Yes.
Um, so for anyone who's listening and wanting to learn how to do watercolor or like wash paintings, invest in like if you don't have a lot of money, invest in cheap watercolors, but get yourself some good high quality watercolor paper.
That I can agree with. I did a little bit of painting in high school, and we did do some watercolor amongst other things, and that was definitely something I remember because the best watercolor paintings came out with people who had like the better papers instead of people who just messed around and did it on like the really basic printer paper.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same thing with markers as well, like, and I think pencil crayons as well. It's all like traditional art. A lot of it has to do less with the quality of your art supplies and
With the
more
paper.
so the paper, the
That is something I do
texture, the
agree.
weight, like it's stuff like that.
See, that's
Also,
why
for
I
people who do
gravitate
art,
towards the sketchbooks because of that reason too, Skull.
yeah. I mean, I work with alcohol markers. It's a little bit different, I guess.
It is different because I just sketch things out in the books itself for designs and don't actually color it or anything anymore. So I prefer like sturdier, not really sturdier paper, but like sketch quality paper.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it
Um,
just eh.
yeah. Another thing a lot of people seem to think is the case with traditional art is that more expensive always means better.
No.
No, absolutely not. Um, like I said, I had a $200 set of alcohol markers that I absolutely hated using. I have a set that costed me half the price and gave me way more colors, and I am very much more content using that. They work better. The cheaper art supplies work better sometimes.
More than sometimes. Again, it's really just in the paper quality and things like that,
Yeah.
as well as your own skill too.
Yeah.
Because again, it's the same reason why I never used Prismacolors when I was doing traditional arts because they were
Yeah.
often too expensive. When I could
Yeah,
get
no.
Crayola and
I
everything else cheaper.
I definitely understand that.
Uh,
With my first like I mean, I only recently started with buying the Prismacolor Premier pencil crayons. Before I started high school, I was using nothing but Crayola. Then my first year of high school, I saved up and I got myself a set of Prismacolor Scholar. It's about twice the price of a box of like 24 Crayola pencil crayons, but it was worth it because, it was this nice in between where I get to learn how to use this like set of pencil crayons that blends a lot easier, just like different build or whatever, and was able to see if I was actually going to like working with softer textured colored pencils. If if you're ever curious or like trying art supplies or whatever, or like moving up into something that's like more advanced, if you can find something that's like a good in between or like student, like art student type in between where like you get the same quality or whatever for a better price, try look into it. It's definitely something I'd recommend if you can.
And also some advice for those working with pencils and learning to work with color pencils. One thing my art teacher taught me was to color in like a circular motion so you don't have the lines, and to make sure that you're
Mm,
always going in the same direction so you can minimize the amount of lines that you have. Makes things look a lot smoother.
yeah. Lotus, funnily enough, that is exactly what trick is used to do stuff with markers as well.
Well,
If you look
shit.
at the artists, if you look at the artists who do their stuff with like Sharpies or whatever, that is exactly what they recommend. Is coloring in circular motion.
Well, shit.
Yeah,
Oh boy. And so with the whole techniques thing, also as I'm thinking about it, it's a whole different set of techniques when you go to work with digital art.
definitely.
So essentially, if you, like me and Skull, come from more traditional beginnings when it comes to art, it is definitely a shift when you go to learn digital art because, again, you're learning how to draw all over again.
It's like a fucking kick in the face.
It really is. But there are still some things that are the same, just not a lot. I mean, one thing I was kind of reminded of, because I occasionally watch some other art advice things, and especially when it comes to digital art, because again, like I'm still learning. I want to try and at least get a little bit better. I probably won't become like these other artists that can just do fucking phenomenal things, but I'd like
We'll
to learn
never
it.
be like master digital artist.
Yeah, no, like the fucking masters, and they're still in high school, but like it is
But it's
it.
also different if you like it's also different because like some people pick up on art mediums faster than others, and then there are people who like start out doing one thing and shift to another. Or, like just it's really just down to the person and like how things happen, I
Well, that
guess.
and the tools are made a lot more accessible now than they were when we were more so growing up, especially when I was growing up. So
Yeah,
again, you'll see it more with kids now, kids and teenagers, that they're able to do things that people probably closer to my age can do, just because they were able to start when they did.
yeah.
So yeah, it's also just a matter of the changing times as well. But in that terms, like again, techniques are still very different. The one thing I had to be reminded of in terms of my own style and drawing and things like that is to not press as heavily down on the pencil itself, because one thing I kind of learned with this drawing tablet is that the pens are oh, what's it called, Skull, like when you like the pressure, the brush increases with like as much pressure you put down.
They're pressure sensitive.
Thank you, yes. So the pen I have is pressure sensitive, so the lighter I push down on it, the smaller the brush strokes will be. But then like the more I press down on it, the bigger the strokes will be. And
Another thing, with digital like drawing tablets and stuff, you can actually adjust like the sensitivity or whatever to make it if you're a more heavy-handed artist or whatever. Like you don't get the stupidly heavy lines and can still do that like pressure gauge or whatever to where like your pressure or whatever is different. Because like everyone draws differently, right?
yes,
That's one advantage to digital art is, like it can be easier for a digital artist if they're heavy-handed. Like, um, if you're doing like traditional art or whatever, like if you're a heavier-handed artist and you're working with like thin paper or whatever, you can just completely destroy your paper.
that is very true. That is probably why I draw the way I do when it comes to digital art is because a lot of the times growing up, I had more of the cheaper paper. Probably also why I gravitate away from printer paper skull. But I would always draw. I learned how to draw very lightly to avoid that very heavy lead left behind, essentially.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, you get lots of lines left behind, and you have to erase, and you still see what you were doing beforehand. And you're like, oh, I don't want to see that now.
yeah, no. Um, yeah, no, I definitely feel that.
But you still have to be careful even when you're doing that with digital art because you don't want to cramp up your hands and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. Another thing is with digital art, like your styluses or whatever, the pen nibs do wear down over time.
Yes.
My first drawing tablet, the way that I had my hand sitting, I actually put a really bad gash in the surface of my drawing tablet because of my nib being worn down and me being heavy-handed. The sharp edge of the nib ended up catching and like slicing into the surface of the tablet.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's always fun.
Yeah. I think I should be good for a little bit longer. It feels a little. It feels normal. It should be fine. But yeah, so Skull, do you have any other thoughts in terms of either digital or traditional art?
Um, Not really directly related to that, but like a tip for artists who are maybe second guess, like new artists or people who are artists for like a long time or whatever, and are like starting to second guess themselves. You're your own worst critic,
That is absolutely
and
true. Oh, that's so fucking
yeah,
true.
if you ever start feeling discouraged about your art, um, I mean, I'm gonna speak a little bit from personal experience here, but like whenever I'm feeling discouraged with my art, it's usually because I'm at that point where I'm not drawing just to draw for fun anymore. I'm starting to get to that point where like I feel the need that I need to like be drawing and just be, especially since I post online. I get to that point where I start to feel like I need to be posting art in order to, keep relevance or whatever. Don't. Don't get too caught up on it. Just draw, have fun. You end up learning a lot more that way.
I'm also going to add on top of that because yesterday when I had my little episode of burnout, that was related to just like actually what you were just talking about. I was starting to feel a little bummed out in regards to my artwork versus other people's artwork and feeling a little inferior just because mine didn't look as fancy as the others even though like I
Oh,
I know what I
yeah.
draw. Like you can't stop it sometimes. Like I know my style, I know
Yeah.
how I draw. I'm comfortable with it, but there are definitely going to be times still where you're going to feel that inferiority and where you feel
Yeah.
like if only I could draw like them, maybe I'd get a lot more attention, maybe I'd do a lot better with everything else. Which again, it can also associate too with burnout and bring you down a lot faster. And trust me, once
Yeah.
you hit that burnout, you don't want you don't want that. I'm feeling
Oh,
better
yeah.
today, thankfully. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, that stuff is very dangerous. Um, and also to add on to draw for fun and things like that, make sure that even when you do draw for your job and things like that, and you ever feel the need that you need to be drawing to be productive and things like that, stop and take a break.
Yeah.
I've had to do this, not necessarily, well, I kind of doing it with drawing, but I do it more with writing because I am a writer first, second, an artist. But I have to do this with my own writings, otherwise, I will get that burnout and I'll not want to do anything again for another like 1 or 2 years, which was basically me from 2020 to 2022. It's only since this year I've been able to write again, and I do not want to go through what I did before, so I take the days to take those breaks. Do nothing but play
Yeah.
video games, mind numb my mind on YouTube watching the same shit I've watched every other day. Maybe stare at the wall and daydream. Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot you can actually
Run
do
a
after
Dungeons and
that.
Dragons campaign.
Oh my god. Bullshit your way through one. Who said that? Oh gosh. But no,
I
yeah.
mean, you really, with our group, you definitely ended up getting yourself into like a point where you were definitely bullshitting your way through some of the stuff that we learned.
I bullshit my way through a lot of it. I don't plan anything when it comes to you guys. I give myself a basic idea of what to do, and then I let you guys take over from there and adjust to that. So, yes, I bullshit my way. Welcome to being a DM. One part planning, 9 parts fucking bullshit and improv.
Yeah.
Oh, you gotta love it. Anyway, no, yeah,
Then
so.
you've also a small part of judging your group for their stupidity.
I don't need to be a
You've
DM
done
to
it,
do
don't
that.
lie.
I don't need to be a DM to do that. I judge you guys every day. You especially.
Thank you. I think that is a compliment.
Good.
Other people would be offended, Raptor.
Oh, good for them. But at least I don't have to worry about that now.
Yeah.
Any what are some other things we could possibly say when it comes to like tips or anything with traditional digital art?
This is a very, like, I don't. It's kind of an unpopular opinion to some people, but one thing I learned from an artist that I quite enjoy is that um, there's not really such thing as like a 100% unique art style. Everyone takes inspiration from other artists
Very
or like
true.
other things they've seen in some way. So if you ever like see an art style that you like, or like see a coloring style or something that you like and you want to try it or like a bit of it, go for it. You might end up like improving your art style or finding that you like your art more for doing it. Experiment, go for it, have fun.
Yeah, and it's okay to let yourself take inspiration from different things. I know Skull here, his styles are constantly changing and shifting at this point as they try to figure out what they want to do. Ain't that right,
What
Skull?
am I?
What am I? But I know with me, my style's a little more not
Consistent.
that's it consistent. Thank you. Mine, I can say, takes inspiration from the Sonic the Hedgehog Archie comics that came out when I started reading when I was in high school, with a lot more of the bolder lines and the older shading in the comics, not so much in the more newer ones. I can't remember. I think issue 200 and onward or something like that. I don't know. It's been a while since I've looked at the comics. And then obviously it takes inspiration from anime, which probably more westernized anime than actual like Japanese anime,
Yeah.
because there's a difference.
My art style is kind of a weird like in between of like a more typical like cartoon, like the softer sort of like squishy type of
It's
cartoons,
got
and
the
then
cute
like
one.
the yeah,
Got the
it's
cute
like
art
more of like a
style.
cutesy cartoony, and then like hints of like a westernized, maybe like slight Japanese inspired anime style.
I definitely agree with that. I see a little bit more cartoon with the hints of the anime style. Whereas, how would you describe my art style, Skull?
I definitely get comic book vibes from your art style.
I can never escape it. Although I have been able to draw comics again ever since I got put on the medication, so it's great. Can't can't be upset with that now, can we?
Yeah.
It took Yeah, it took better part of a decade. Yeah, no. Almost a damn near decade of me not being able to draw comics, and now I can do it again. Yay!
Hey.
Progress! Yay! But yeah, no, I
Yeah.
definitely used to draw comics when I was younger. That was actually my um plan in life originally, was to be a comic book artist. But after a certain incident, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned on the channel, I wasn't able to do it anymore.
I
So,
I think we both told our artist trauma stories.
yeah, and we pretty much did. But no, yeah,
It was like our first art episode, I think.
I think so. I think it's when we were just like talking about art in general, and our experiences with it and things like that. And yeah, here we are giving tips. Yay! But you got anything you want to add on top of that, Skull?
Nah.
You said all you wanted to in terms of traditional and digital art for tips and tricks and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if we think of more, we can always do another episode later.
Yeah, or post it to Twitter.
Yeah.
The Twitter we don't really use.
I mean, to be fair, I would be posting art to our Twitter, but I kind of got booted off of the chat Twitter, and then
You
was
forgot
never
about it.
given the new password.
Raptor put it in there. He put the password in the Discord.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll have to go back and fucking look later, I
I think he
guess.
pinned it, just so you know. But yes.
Did he
Um
put just the password, or is it like the general login information? Because I don't remember the email either.
oh, for fuck's sake. Okay, well, we'll take care of this in a moment. But I think that is all for right now. This has been a Skull and Lotus with your art chat, talking about the traditional and digital, all that fun stuff. And so we hope you guys have a good morning, night, evening, day, whatever the case may be, and we'll see you all next time.